Speaking of new adventures, we are slowly creeping up on voting and possibly getting a new elected official in the White House as well as locally. So there are some things that we all need to be aware of for early voting. And joining me right here live on The Splash to give out all that important information is joining us. We have West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder right here talking about early voting. Thank you so much for being here, first and foremost.
Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you today.
Absolutely. So we want to get into the nitty gritty of this early voting and how it works essentially, but let's just get into some generics of dates. What are some important details for residents to know as far as dates for early voting in West Bloomfield?
Early voting begins this Saturday and it continues for 9 days. So it is Saturday, Sunday, Monday through Friday, and then the following Saturday and Sunday. The hours are daily from 8:30 to 4:30, except on Thursday when it's noon to 8. It is right here on main campus at the library, the main West Bloomfield main library branch, and it's right in their meeting room. It is easy. You know, I've always been a precinct voter because I like to see people and get my sticker. And I am now a convert to early voting. I get to see people and get my sticker.
Yeah.
And you can also request your absentee ballot. And you can vote it at home and take it there and tabulate it yourself, which gives you feedback. If you were to make a mistake, it does send the ballot back to you and allow you to spoil it and request a new one. So it really is a nice, easy mix. I'm loving it, and the feedback from everyone has been great.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. And I love that you're advocating for not only just early voting, absentee voting, just different things, because everyone's schedule is different in what we have going on. With that being said, just briefly asking you about that absentee ballot, the regulations, can you just talk about how the recent change in the regulations impacted the volume of absentee ballot requests in West Bloomfield?
Well, it's interesting, Kevin, because right now I would say in the absentee ballots we're down from where we were in 20, but 20 was the height of the pandemic. So I don't think it means we're going to be down voters. I think we will actually be up a little bit. We're anticipating an 80% turnout, and we had 33,000 absentee ballots in 2020. We're only at about 21,000 out right now. So we won't see that number, but I do think that the polls are going to be busy, and I hope that we see people that are participating in early voting. I don't think ultimately we will be down numbers at all. It's just going to be how it spreads in terms of absentee and precinct day or polling day voting.
I'm glad you provided that context because it makes sense. Yeah, that was during the pandemic when everyone was pretty much trying to stay away from other people. So it would make sense to get more of the absentee ballots from that perspective. So with that being said, a lot of people are doing absentee ballots for the first time, even early vote, even just voting in general for the first time. What are some of the biggest mistakes that voters can make on these ballots that you've seen?
Well, I can tell you the question we get multiple times every day. Or someone comes to the window and they think they need to spoil their ballot. Because on a November general election, you have the option to vote straight ticket, which means you select one party or the other, and it fills in all of your votes below for that party on the partisan section. Well, some people like to, color in their straight party vote, but then they color in all the boxes below anyway. So they think that that's going to spoil their ballot. And it doesn't. It's okay if you vote straight party and you color in one or none or all of the boxes. It won't invalidate your ballot, and it will fill in the ones that you didn't for that party. Now, the thing that many people are not aware of is that, and it actually is right on the instructions that come with your ballot, but people aren't necessarily reading it, is that you can vote straight party, select that box to fill in all your partisan candidates. But you can then cross over if there's 1, 2, or 3 contests or whichever contest you would like to vote for the other column. You can cross over and do that, and it will override your straight party vote on those contests and fill in all of the other partisan contests with the party you selected. So,
interesting.
People don't realize. It's amazing that people don't realize it. I guess it's not amazing because it's not something that's commonly known. But every day we get at least people that think they need to spoil their ballot because they either crossed parties for a general election. In a primary election, that does matter. You do have to stay on one side of the ballot.
Right.
But a general election is different. And even if you vote straight party, you can still cross over into the other column. It'll just override it.
Yes, thank you for explaining that for myself and our audience in general, because that could be one of the common misconceptions about early voting in general. And with us right here live on The Splash, West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder, breaking down early voting, absentee voting, and things of that nature as we inch a little bit closer to November 5th, voting, Election Day. Now, kind of going into early voting as people are preparing for that, just doing it for the first time. What are some things they should be aware of as far as requirements? Do they need ID? Do they need a passport or voter registration card, things of that nature?
So what they do need by law, what they have to have is either a photo ID that's acceptable, or they have to sign an affidavit stating that they are not in possession of their photo ID.
Okay.
Now, I always like to remind people, if someone does choose to vote as an affidavit voter, they are a registered voter in West Bloomfield Township. It's not just somebody that comes in off the street and says, I'd like to vote today.
Right.
They are a registered voter. And the 14 days before the election, all registration for that election must take place in person at the clerk's office with residency verification. So again, they would be a registered voter that may not be in possession of their license. So they are entitled to sign an affidavit and vote. But they would want to bring their license with them. Many people do bring their voter registration card, but it's not required.
Okay.
As in terms of identification, the driver's license or the state ID are the only two forms of acceptable identification that could be expired. But they can bring a current passport, and there's a whole list of other items that they can bring. But it does have to be photo ID that is accepted, as for identification for voting.
I want to make sure I heard you correct. Did you say you can bring a driver's license or ID as long as it has a picture of you, even if it's expired?
If it's a Michigan voter driver's license or voter ID, that's the only form of identification that can be expired. You have seniors that may not renew it, and so they tend to. So yes, that's the only form, though. Everything else has to be current. We'll take a student ID. There's a whole list of acceptable forms of photo identification, but everything else must be current.
Got you. That good information. I'm glad I caught that and clarified that with you also. So as we are continuously getting close to it, a lot of people are maybe even anticipating going for in-person. I think we are all anticipating a big voter turnout just in general, whether you're voting absentee, early, or coming in person. But let's go to the in-person part. How is your office preparing for those last-minute in-person voter registrations or voters in general now that the deadline is approaching?
Well, we're making sure we're doing our best to get the message out, and you guys are a really important part of getting that message out to voters so that they know that there are different ways that they have to vote now, that they can vote in person on Election Day. They can come to the clerk's office and obtain an absentee ballot. They have early voting. We really do try to make it easy for them, but and actually following the state and federal election law. But it is, we do try to be accessible. Now we are planning to have a large number of voters in our precincts. We anticipate we'll have about 46,000 ballots cast for this election. We're looking at about 23,000 of those being cast in the precincts. So we figure each precinct will have between about 750 and 1,200 voters in it. So it will be a busy day. One more reason to think about early voting: the lines will not be as long, and your election day lines will be, will likely be long. We are seeing, that surge. We are staffing the precincts accordingly. We will have, probably the highest staffing we've ever had. We prepare for life happens and people get sick, people call off for different reasons. So we're prepared for that, and then to make sure that those precincts are comfortably staffed. We've been doing a lot of training of our election workers. These are people, it's always important to remember your election workers are your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues at work. They're people in your community that step up and work Election Day to make sure that we can cover and staff 26 precincts as well as an absent voter counting board. So, treat them friendly. They're doing a job. But this is a job they do once, twice, three, and this year 4 times a year. It's not one that they do every day. So we rely on training to make up for what they don't get in day-to-day experience. So we do a lot of training. The poll workers that are in your precincts go through election inspector training, and then they go through electronic poll book training specifically geared toward learning the computer and entering voters. But yeah, I will say if you do vote in a precinct this time, I do suggest you bring your patients with you.
Oh, yes.
We all know we're living in more, challenging times, but also I do think you're going to see a large turnout
Mm-hmm.
in those precincts. I'm not seeing the volume of absentee ballots going out that I would have anticipated. Again, we're at 21,000 now. We had 33,000 in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing people choose, other ways to cast their ballot. And I would plan accordingly, knowing that your precincts are going to be busy on election day. And think of, if you do need to vote on election day, think of the busy times. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
goes first thing in the morning before work. So if you go at 11, it's not going to be as crowded. If you go at 3, it's not going to be as crowded. It's those, before work and
And
after
after
work
work,
times
yeah.
and lunch that are going to be more crowded.
Ooh, yeah, good. So, hey, I'm glad you landed the plane right there. That's a great, great point. That's why we have you here. And with us right here live on The Splash, West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder explaining early voting, absentee voting, and in-person voting as we are getting closer to the November 5th election day. Just a few more questions before we let you go. I just want to point out how I think it's very important, like you said, bring your patients with you and be respectful of other people. There's going to be a lot of different people on different sides going in these lines. There's going to be people probably around and trying to influence you and things of that nature. So be patient, be respectful of others and our election workers. But one thing that was a hot topic in the 2020 election, voter fraud, mishandling of ballots, things of that nature. Can you just please explain some of the specific measures your office is taking to make sure that absentee ballots, early ballots, and just in-person ballots are all turned in to avoid mishandling and fraud?
Well, I think one thing people don't always understand is there are systems in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if you look at, the most recent cases, the system worked. It caught the problems. So I think that one of the best ways to have faith in the process and it is to work an election and see
Yeah.
the checks and balances that are in place and understand well, that when we take in a ballot, any person could go to the michigan.gov/vote, confirm that we've received their ballot. If that ballot shows that it's received, we have to balance to it at the end of the night, whichever way that vote is cast. So if your ballot is received, you can rest assured that it was tabulated. I think that sometimes the narrative doesn't reflect what's actually happening, and I think people who actually have worked an election have a different understanding of the process, and the checks and balances are in place. I think there's this vision that we put out a ballot box, we pick it up at the end of the day, and we count the ballots. It's much more prescribed than that. We follow state and federal election law, and again, every ballot has to be accounted for at the end of the evening, whether whether it is cast as an early vote, whether it's cast as an election day vote, or cast as an absentee vote. But that precinct balances out at the end of the day. Things that people don't realize, every signature is verified. And just to make sure I mention, when we look at your signature, we're comparing it to what you have on your driver's license. So when there's a problem is when somebody just, scribbles on their driver's license, but they decide to be really careful when they sign their ballot, it's not going to match what we have. So we are matching it to your driver's license or your state ID. But again, I invite anyone who wants to understand the process to work an election. I had a very skeptical woman who took me up on it and did work an election. And I asked her in the middle of the day, do you feel better? And she said, I felt better at the training. I tell everyone. So I just think that's the best way to understand it. And another thing I've noticed is people have a tendency now to listen to non-subject matter experts that have become experts on elections. Well, if you listen to someone who's not a subject matter expert, you may get one who knows what they're talking about, and I do know many of those, and you may not get one that knows what they're talking about. So it's really important. If you have questions or you want to know something, contact an election official, contact a clerk. You don't have to live in West Bloomfield to contact me. I'm happy to answer questions. I would rather you're getting your information from a clerk than from Facebook or TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
So
Everybody is a Facebook expert, TikTok expert, whatever. No. Let's go to the official clerks of our townships and our cities. Hey, Debbie, we appreciate you. Right before we land the plane, just real quick, if anyone is listening and want to find out more information about absentee voting, early voting, or in-person voting in West Bloomfield, how may they do so?
So the easiest way, well, you can just come up to the clerk's office. I have a, 8 to 4:30, a very friendly staff. I get comments all the time on how friendly they are, and you'll get a friendly greeting, but we can take care of whatever it is that you need to. If it's obtain an absentee ballot or get information, you can always, call us at 248-451-4848, or you can go to our website, and our website has a lot of information, including links to the things that you need, like if you need an absentee ballot application. Now, Kevin, I do want to point out for people, we are now close enough to the wedding, oh my goodness, the election. We are now close enough to the election that I would not rely on the mail if you don't need to. If you need to get a ballot sent to you, it has to get to you through the mail and get back through the mail. So it is better if you are able to get up here and obtain your absentee ballot. You'll leave with it in hand, and if you can bring it to a drop box. Now, obviously, there are people who don't have that option and do need to rely on the mail. And I would say if that's you and you do need to rely on the mail, don't hold on to that ballot for very long. Get it in the mail as soon as possible. And do know, I don't want to forget to mention that this Friday is the last time that you can spoil an absentee ballot that's already been returned by coming into the clerk's office, putting in writing that you request a new one, and and then you can obtain a new one. We'll reject the ballot that you were issued. That deadline is this Friday. It's important that I'm mentioning that because it did move up a week from what it was previously. Reason being that you now have early voting and pre-processing, so they moved that deadline up to accommodate it. But it is something that's a change I do want to make sure voters are aware of. But if you have questions on anything, call the clerk's office. We're going to give you the right answer.
And we appreciate that so much. It wouldn't mean anything if I said it, Debbie, and that's why we have you here. Thank you again for joining us, the West Bloomfield Township Clerk, Miss Debbie Biner. Thank you again.
Thanks, Kevin. You have a great day. Thank you.